going to talk about deploying Windows Server, and my name is Mikael Nyström. I'm from Sweden. Session code is 41. Yee-hoo. That's me. I'm addicted to cars, apparently. I have a Camaro 2015, a Jeep Wrangler, and a Honda, and then I have a garden tractor, and another bike, and another car, and 3 garage, and a pool, and I have too much time. That's my home lab. When people ask me, how do you have time to do all this stuff? You know, I have a home lab. Yeah, I have that too. I have 2 computers. I have 2 racks. That's a home lab. If you have anything less than this, you're an amateur. Which is fine. So the thing is that deploying Windows Server, I've been doing deployment for so many years, I can't even remember. The first time I did it was on 8-inch floppies. Anybody remember that? Horrible thing. That's how old I am. And for the first time, this is really changing. It's changing faster than you can imagine. Now, you know that Windows Server 2016 is only Windows Server 2016. Well, it's not true anymore because you're going to have 2 versions every year of Windows Server 2016. And they are changing the content, the functionality, the purpose, and the way it behaves in every release. Now, you have the option to stick. You can stay. And you go like, I'm not doing any kind of upgrades. Then you're going to end up, I don't know, you're not going to be able to do anything at all. Because everything that is really cool, I mean, if we check the upcoming version of Windows Server 16, they added the ability to do data deduplication on REFS volumes, and they added the ability to do something called cluster sets. That means you can manage more than 100 clusters as one cluster. You can group clusters. You can really say, this is my cluster set. And you can deal with cluster over updating across clusters. That's awesome. But if you're running the UI version, you don't have that. And it won't show up. Ever. Because everything is going to happen in the core version. They, from the beginning, said that everything is going to be in the nano version. Now, the 1703 version of the nano edition, well, they removed everything that makes it possible to install on a physical machine. Because now, nano server is shifting into be just a container operating system and nothing else. So that means that everything that has to do with infrastructure, meaning storage, network, hypervisors, is going to end up in only the core version. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this means that you will end up in this. You are going to get 2 versions of everything that Microsoft creates every year. And if you really believe that you can manually do upgrades, manually test and verify all the applications, manually pushing buttons to make this happen, if you really truly believe that, you're stupid. Because you can't. You don't have the time. Well, you can always compensate the time by, hiring a bunch of people, like thousands, of which you can't afford. So then you don't have the money. So the only way you have to do is, the only way you can fix this is either you don't run new versions of Windows. But that also means you can't change hardware. That means that you need to stick with the current chipset that is supported in 1607, and that means that the entire new generation of Intel servers, that actually includes iWarp and other really cool things, you can't run that because you need 1709 to be able to run that, because the new chipset doesn't fly on the old version of Windows.
Can you install a long-term server bench every year, so we can integrate this easily
So the question is, can you install the long-term servicing branch every year? The answer will be, since they're not releasing it every year, they're only releasing it every 2 or 3 years. So that means that you can start over every 3 years. But that also means that you need to test and verify everything that happens during these 3 years anyway. So yes, you can, but it's not going to be that easy. So this is going to happen. Now, that means we're going to shift into demos because you need to figure out a couple of things. You need to automate as much as you can. That's number one. Everything that you do 3 times in your life, besides eating and marriage and stuff like that, can be automated. Every time I hear people say, we can't automate that. Yeah, you can. You really can. No, I can't. Yes, you can. How many of you have heard of self-service? Yeah. Is it common to have self-service? No. So if I pick up my cell phone there and I install an app, isn't that self-service? If I go to McDonald's or Burger King, whatever, and I click on a hamburger, isn't that self-service? And people go like, self-service can never be invented in a restaurant. It's impossible to have self-service. You need to have a chef. Bollocks. You don't. Because the entire hamburgers joints in the US are now figuring out how to fire everyone. Because you can automate everything. 10 years back, you can't do that. So please don't say you can't do that. What you need to say is that I don't know how to automate that. And I need to figure that out. But it is always possible. So we're going to talk about a couple of things here. We're going to start with Image Factory, because you still need to have reference images for Windows Server and for Windows 10 Client as well. Now, this is the, let's open a data center core here. Depends on the usage, but one of the things you want to do is most likely to install .NET Framework. That still depends on the kind of application running. If this is going to be a Hyper-V server and nothing else, then you don't need .NET Framework. If this is going to be used as an application server, I'm pretty sure the applications are written in .NET Framework, not version 4. It's going to be something else. Since this is a payload, it's missing from the beginning, so we add that to the reference image. And this is how you do it. Check it. We also need to have the C++ runtimes. We need to have the C++ runtimes because people actually write software using C++. I don't, but developers does. Anybody seen a developer? Weird people, long hair, strange guys. They use C++. I don't know which version, so I'm going to install all of them because it's an application server. The application server is supposed to run application. I need to put it in, otherwise things are not going to work. What else do we need to do? Well, we could enable remote desktop, for instance. We could. How do you enable remote desktop? It just happens to be a file in the operating system, so when I create my reference images, they always enable for remote desktop. If we're running in the cloud, the only way to access the machine is using remote desktop. We can't really open the door to the cloud. It doesn't exist, so we need to have remote desktop. But there's one thing we should do, and I don't do this in this version, but I should. I should add this. Here's a disable features and functions. And if I go to roles and uninstall roles and features and go to Windows Server 16, anybody knows what I want to remove? SMB1. In the next version of Windows Server, 1709, SMB1 is by default removed. The same goes for Windows 10 Client. SMB1 is removed from all the current operating systems, but we're going to still do the 1607 for a while. So yeah, you should remove this for security reasons, of course. You also need to update the operating system, stuff like that. Now, this is just a task sequence using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. It's pretty easy to set up. There's at least, I think, 1.5 million people worldwide that uses this to create reference images. Now, the question is, how do you create this? Well, you set it up, you import everything. When you're done, you create a boot image. You take the boot image, you create a virtual machine that either runs Hyper-V or VMware, it really doesn't matter, and then you do something called the build and capture process. Now, I always argue with people because people say, oh, you don't need to do that. You can offline inject patches. Yes, you can. It sucks. Don't do that. The only thing that really happens is that it doesn't install the patch. It's pre-staging the patch. It's just copying the darn file to the operating system, and then it puts it in a boot sequence. So the next time you boot the machine, then the patch actually gets installed. So if the purpose was to make a fast deployment, you just created the opposite around. It's now taking 10 minutes to boot. That wasn't really the purpose, to create a reference image, right? It also puts the burden on the network because you're going to put the patch inside the package. And since it's not installed, both the old code and the new code is going to be in the WIM file at the same time. So it just becomes bigger. So it's bigger, takes more time to copy, and also takes more time to boot. Offline injection of patches is a really bad choice, but it works. You can also, do you have a bicycle? Sorry? Do you have a car? Bicycle? I do have a bicycle. Yeah? Okay. Is it possible to take the bicycle and use that to go to China? Yes. Yeah. Would you do that? Do you think it's a great idea? You need to be there tomorrow. Is it still a great idea? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you can do offline patch management, and that's pretty much like taking a bicycle to China. Don't do that. It's horrible. Next step is to use PowerShell. And if we open this and go to here, what you can see right now is actually a process that runs, and it's building the reference image for me. If I open my Hyper-V Manager here, I'm going to see down here that it's currently building a reference image. Now, in this case, it's popping up and saying, hey, you can pick and choose, and I can select the image I would like to have and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it. Thank you. I'm going to turn this machine off. And then we're going to go back to the script. Because what we can do with the PowerShell script is basically to do the following things. We have the ability to read an XML file. We can now import the PowerShell modules for MDT together with another PowerShell module that's called PSINI. PSINI can create any ini file into a hash table. That means that the custom settings.ini file that is used in Microsoft Deployment Toolkit is now a database, which means that I can on the fly modify and update that. I'm going to read it, I'm going to connect to it, we're going to do a bunch of stuff. We're going to get all the task sequences, which is also nice to have. We're going to remove the old WIM files. We're then going to create the VMs, build the VMs, and the fun part is this. We're going to grab the BIOS serial numbers that is inside each of the VM, take that and put that in the custom settings.ini file on the fly. So if I go here, go to rules, you can see that it already did that. So that means that when the machine boots up, it knows that this is my serial number, therefore I need the following settings, then I should run the following task sequences with the following settings, with the following applications, with the following thing, which basically means that what I do is that I run a PowerShell script scheduled once a month that builds every reference image task sequence and creates all the Vim files for everything. Then we take that, and then we run another script. Because the only thing I have now is a Vim file, right? How do you know if it's going to work or not? You don't. So you run the next one, which is the verification and build. So now it grabs all these Vim files that we have captured, take each of them, and build a new VM. Fire them up, and log on to them to verify that all the applications and all the patches and all the settings that we should have was actually applied. And then we throw everything away. And then we convert them into VHD files or VDMK files or whatever you want to have. This way the Vim file and the virtual hard drives are in the same generation with the same feature set, and everything is automated. I need to do this because we run clouds. I don't have time to generate reference images for our customers manually. And you should. Because if you don't, a developer is going to build a new VM and you go like, oh, that's really fast. 6 minutes. Then I need to spend 2 days running Windows Update before I can use it. What's the point of having a deployment solution that works like that? Last time I did it, that was 6 months ago. I was working with a customer and I spent 1.5 days charging $240 an hour running Windows Update manually. Because they never patched their image, but they had a bleeding fast deployment solution. Most expensive server ever installed. You can download everything like this on GitHub. No issue whatsoever. Now, let's talk about something else. Let's go back here. Let's talk about physical server operating system deployment, because everything is going to be the cloud and blah, blah, blah. We know that. It's just that it's not going to happen tomorrow, so we still need to have physical servers installed. It's funny, if you start thinking of this, the cloud actually runs on physical servers. So someone actually needs to install something sometimes. I actually asked Microsoft, why don't you go to the cloud? What do you mean? Well, you're claiming that everybody should go to the cloud. Yeah, but we are the cloud. So if you're the cloud, why don't customers become the cloud? No, it's better to run our cloud. Because, well, it's yeah, better. You make money. Yeah, that too. Okay. Just checking. Anyway, here is at home. Here's a physical machine. Well, it's not a physical machine, but it's the ILO interface, and I need to log on to this. Password is the password. I try to avoid everything that is related to security, because it's just horrible. And that's the one machine, and we're going to need to go to this machine. Admin. Password. So, yeah, I missed that. Thank you. Admin. Here we go. Now, these servers is something you can laugh about. They are tiny, small, bad performance. They have 16 gigs of RAM. They are HP microservers, generation 8. And people ask, why do you have those? What do you use them for? Nothing. I just install Windows on them. Because it's the smallest, cheapest, most silent server that acts like a real server. It has full ILO, full IPMI, full auto band management, and I'd rather have 10 of these, which I have, than have 10 DL380s, because the noise they generate compared to this is undescribable. I do change the hard drive so they all run on SSD drives. And the reason is it's faster to install Windows. Yeah, but then you can't use them for anything. That's what I do. Reinstall them. That's the only thing I use them for. So the reason I have 16 gigs of RAM is because, it doesn't look good when you have just one memory slot filled. So for that too. It looks better. How much do you need to have? Well, you need to have 8 gigs or something like that. Otherwise, you can't run everything you need to run. I also turned off, in this case, the RAID controller because I don't need to have that. Since Microsoft is shifting over to everything to software-defined and software-defined storage network, it's all about doing everything in the software, meaning I build storage spaces direct instead of using the built-in RAID controllers. What is this? 6 one-time network. There you go. How many of you are using iDRAC or ILO to access your servers? Anyone? Okay. It's pretty neat, right? Nice. It's nice. Yeah, yeah. Have you ever had this press the, because the certificate is invalid, certificate name is invalid, you need to bypass that, you go like, you should never bypass that, right? But you need to do that. Why do you need to bypass the certificate? Because it's incorrectly set up, right? Can we just agree on that? Because you did it the wrong way. The reason why you need to answer all these questions is the server wasn't deployed correctly. Now, is it hard to create a certificate? Not really, but if you try to do it manually, it is a horrible experience because you need to create a file, you need to log onto the machine, and then the best part of this is that we have accepted your request to generate a certificate file. Please look back soon to get the result. What is soon? Well, soon could be like in 10 minutes or so. So when I do this, I actually use Light Touch for a lot of server deployments. A lot of my customers use that. Why don't they use Configuration Manager? Because it's too big. It requires an agent. And this one is lighter. It's more flexible. And if you want to do modifications to it, you can do that in a zip. If you want to do modifications to Configuration Manager, you need to spend time. I'm going to pick Windows Server 16. I'm going to do Data Center. Data Center. There you go. That wasn't really the complex question. As you can see, the name here is actually predefined. The reason why it's predefined is because the name is actually entered in the MDT database. So if I need to reinstall this server, it's always going to have the same name with the same features and the same functionality, because I need to assume that things can break, and if they do, we need to reinstall them. How many of you have ever seen a documentation done with pictures? It's horrible. It's like, it's a kid's book. It's one of those point and click books for that age. That's not documentation, that's just a laugh. How in earth would you be possible to repeat the exact same steps? You can't, because at the time you're going to do this, something has changed. They go like, well, I think they mean like this. So I don't need to fill out the name. It's also automatically going to join the domain, but the interesting part comes here. So we're going to install the HP support pack automatically and silently. We're also going to install the HP BIOS commandlets. The reason why I want to install the BIOS commandlets is because now I can use the BIOS, so I can use PowerShell to configure the entire BIOS, meaning I can do high power, low power, whatever tree hugging mode I want to do, or whatever I need to do in the BIOS can now be done using PowerShell, which means I can state every settings I want to have externally in a database and just configure the machine entirely. But I can also enable updates can enable the pause, I can install the ILO certificates. The ILO certificates is a PowerShell script that actually requests a certificate template, feed the engine in ILO with the template, and wait until the certificate has been released, and then inject it. And the other one is actually ILO settings. It's a lie, but it's basically resetting the entire ILO back to factory defaults and reconfigure it every time we redeploy the machine. So I'm going to check these boxes here, and then we have something else. This one. As you see, it's a drop-down box. These are ready-made concepts. So I already can define and say, this is going to be a compute cluster, a storage cluster, a lab machine, whatever it's going to be. I have predefined roles. Now, you could, in theory, actually do this inside a task sequence. But that means you need to have one task sequence for each and every role. This is just a PowerShell script. Now, the way I'm picking and choosing in the task sequence like this, it's something you can't do. It's actually one of those things that is impossible to do. And the reason why we can do that is because we did something weird. I have a very weird application here. It says configuration server, and if you look at it closely, you're going to see that in the comments field, there's an HTML code. So in the notes field, you can type code. And if you modify one of the lines in the configuration scripts in MDT, it doesn't become notes, it just becomes code. So then you can run active code anywhere in the scripts, which is kind of weird. And yes, you can download that information from here. And CTI config. Here's another example of that. How you can create configuration the same way, so you can do whatever you like. And this is why a lot of customers are using Light Touch to deploy servers, because if we want to add or remove something, we need to have this. We need to select the team. We need to select the function. Doing the same time kind of work in Configuration Manager is absolutely possible. It takes 3 to 6 months to do that. I don't have the time. Light Touch is faster. Yeah, but then you can't automate things. True, well, I can. It's just that you're not going to automatically in-place upgrade servers anyway. You're going to bare metal deploy them because that's the only way you're going to be able to do this. You can do rolling upgrades, but that means bare metal deployment anyway. So the idea of doing Configuration Manager, it doesn't really help. So that's how you deploy servers that is physical. Well, almost, kind of, because there are other ways to do it as well. You can also use VMM. Now, I know a bunch of you are running VMware, and I'm not going to have that discussion. I don't do VMware at all. What I do with VMware is throw it out. That's my job. I literally kill about 25 to 30 VMware data centers every month. And it has nothing to do with technology or better or worse. It's just about money. That's very simple. So I don't do that. But I do Hyper-V. And when I do, we started out doing manual deployment like everybody else. And after a while, I realized that the only way to deal with a lot of Hyper-V servers is actually to use what's called System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And it took a while before we realized that it does have a really neat wizard. You can use Virtual Machine Manager and do a next step-by-step to deploy a physical machine. But VMM is actually using PowerShell. So what I can do is this. And this is what we do. Now, this is the entire configuration. I specify the base motherboard controller address, the name the machine should have, and if it should be deployed or not. That's not really complicated, right? This is, however, slightly more complicated. What we do is that we use PowerShell functions to manage and control ILO and Virtual Machine Manager. We read in the text files, we add all the users needed and configure the entire ILO remotely. So we don't need to manually power on the machine and configure it at all. What I need is someone with brains enough to rack and stack the server and give me the tag. I need the tag because I need to have the default name and password. Unless it's a Dell, because then it's root and Calvin, and everybody knows that, but it's different. Then we specify network, protocol, and all that stuff. We grab all these computers, and we find them, so we can verify that we can access them. And then we use a feature that's called Find SE Computer, together with something called Deep Discovery. That basically powers on the machine and boots on Windows PE and do a complete hardware discovery, report back everything to Virtual Machine Manager, and the entire machine ends up here, in that object. And then when I run that object, I can now see things like this. The machine, the name, the IP address, standard. But it doesn't give me the hardware information. It just gives me a rough estimate, right? But the thing is that you can see there's a physical machine in the end here. And if you do that, and you run that one, you suddenly get more, because now we have computer, network operators, network adapters, and disks. So if I want to grab all the network adapters, here's all the network adapters. The plug-and-play IDs, I know exactly what drivers I need to have. The entire configuration for network, for storage, and for the computer. That means that I can now have logic in the PowerShell script that automatically configures the entire network, switch, storage, and everything. This is how we build data centers. It takes approximately 4 hours to build a fabric stack, and then we run PowerShell scripts to fire every physical machine up. And it's so funny because I actually have people working at in my garden today. They are fixing stuff outside the garage, and my wife and I talked about that's going to take like a week or two, maybe a month for these guys to fix everything outside the garage. They are done, and they arrived 7 in the morning. And I was like, what do you mean done? Well, they are done. They went here, 5 people, and they are done. But okay, yeah, that's a difference. They are professionals. So when we build data centers, it takes usually 3 days to build an entire data center. And no customer will ever believe that. They go, no, you can't do that in 3 days. Yeah, we can. As long as the physical hardware is at the place, right? It needs to be that. So we can do that. That basically means that if we run this entire script, it will configure the entire machine and it will start building it. So I'm going to run this section here. There you go. If we connect to this machine, we're going to now see that machine is being built out by Virtual Machine Manager. Oops, I'm using that machine already. It nags me about the fact that the computer name is occupied in Active Directory. That's good. Shouldn't be there. So we need to remove that. Do I have Active Directory here? Yay, I have that. Let's remove that. Name was find. It's a protection. Host 201. Hopefully it was 201. It could be another machine as well. You never know. 4 each. So that's another way to deploy machines. Now, this doesn't describe how you should build a test and demo environment, because that is something else we need to be able to do. So what's the point of building a lab? How many times do you need to build a lab? I need a lab environment. How often do you need to do that? Every time Microsoft releases a new operating system, you need to rebuild the entire lab. Well, can I have a lab here, and then I have a production environment over here? No, you can't, because there's no way you'll be able to manage both these environments. Because if it's going to take you full time to manage the production, then it's going to take another full time to manage the lab, which is pointless. Nobody wants to pay you to manage the lab, which is not being used. So you need to rebuild it. That's one reason. The other reason to rebuild it is, have you ever done anything on a computer and at the same time you push the button, you go like, this was a really bad decision. I know I shouldn't have done that. Anybody done that? Yeah? That's why we have a lab. That's why we do those things in a lab. We play, we test, we verify, we do all these weird things in the lab. After you've done that, can you perform another test? No, you can't, because you destroyed it the first time. And even if you reversed it, are you really sure you actually did reverse the failed domain rename script that you run? It just blows up and go like, I think I can reverse it. That's like buying a car. It's like, has it been smashed? Yes, but we fixed it. You really want to buy that car? No. It's a smashed car. So, what you need to do is this. You need to have PowerShell. And you need to, yeah, there it is. Oh, let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. So this is an XML file, which you can download from GitHub. It contains the entire configuration of the physical machine. Well, actually the entire environment. All the servers, all the domains, all the networks, all the IP addresses. It is a documented entire environment. All workstations, all clients, all servers, all the in-system center, everything you want to have. It's defined in an XML file. Then you have a bunch of scripts. And then you have a control script that builds stuff. I need to just remove a VM here. I need to find the name of that. DCGV. There you go. So, and then you build the machines. I already built the domain controller because it's just extremely boring to watch. But this is building a network address translation server. It's basically building a firewall. And then you build your Hyper-V servers. And then you build your, storage nodes. And then you build your remote desktop service. And then you build your Windows 10 client machines. And then you rebuild everything you want to build. You set up your configuration manager server. You set up ops manager. You recreate everything. This serves two purposes. Number one, you now have a demo environment anytime you want. It takes 4 hours to build the entire Microsoft stack with everything they have on my laptop. That means when there's a new version of Windows 10, there's a new version of Config Manager, there's a new version of anything they release, you wipe it, you rebuild it, and you verify that everything works. You automate that.
It's going to be an empty environment though, because this just builds...
No, it's not empty. No, it's not empty. Because you populate everything as well. You shoot in users, data. It could be fake data, it doesn't matter. Just fill it with data.
Every change you make in a production environment, you have to also change how you populate it.
Yeah. I just wipe it and rebuild it. I want to see that maybe you're using SharePoint. You want to know if, because you're using SharePoint on-prem, you want to know if the new Windows 10 client actually works. So here's the new Windows, which you can test in production. But if you do it in production, maybe there's some change that needs to be done on the server, which you can't do, so you can never... You think it's going to work. If we allow this modification on the server, then it should work. Do you know it's good? No, we have... No. But there's an article that says that. This is how you should rebuild from scratch. I know this is, do we really need to do that? I mean, I've never done this before. No, I know, but Microsoft never ever released 2 versions of the operating system every year either. And we already have issues with people saying, I don't have time anymore. I manually spent 4 weeks modifying the start menu in Windows 10. 4 weeks, that's a month. You know there's going to be a new version coming up in 5 months, and then you need to redo everything you did. No, I can use the same things. No, you can't, because there's a new... No, it doesn't work that way.
It takes some preparation to create the scripts.
Well, the scripts are just downloadable. XML file takes, I've done it a couple of times, it takes us approximately an hour to modify the XML file for each customer environment. I know of about 25 consultants in the US. They use this not for proof of concept, they use this for production. That's what they do. This is also the ability to do disaster recover. Hey, my whatever server just, it died, and the backup is, I do have a backup of the database. How did we install it the first time? Well, I have a book here with pictures. That doesn't work. I think you don't need to use this. Johan has the same idea of this. If you go to Johan Arvedmark's blog, you can find something called hydration. But this one you can find at GitHub. It is called Hydration V10. Now, this is something that we constantly work on. It was a while since we did the last update, but we're going to do updates for this during the November timeframe. But it contains all the scripts and all the XML files needed. So you need to have this. You also need to have the functions, because that's a function library for a bunch of different things. And people are always asking me, oh, cool, do you have this for VMware? No, I can't do this with VMware. It's actually impossible. But you said nothing is impossible. Well, that part is actually impossible, because VMware doesn't have the ability to use PowerShell through the bus. So I can't do that. I can build another solution, but I can't use this. So that's what we use, PowerShell Direct. The ability to access the machine using no network whatsoever. So to succeed, you need to think about automation. You need to try to finish all these things. Maybe you should install the certificate the correct way. Maybe you should configure iLook the correct way. maybe you should tell the manager that, no, we're using Dell. That means we're not going to change to HP because we already spent 400 hours developing the PowerShell code to configure the darn Dell machines. Yeah, but HP is cheaper. I don't care. Because it's going to cost us another 400 hours and you can't afford to pay that. That's true. So that's why we're sticking with Dell or HP or whatever. Does it make sense? Perfect. So that means the session is done and over, and we are done. And any questions, by the way? No questions? Yes, go ahead.
Is it possible to automate, so like when you're building base image in MDT, you have to create sometimes applications. Is it, and if you have the same application in SCCM, is it possible to automate like creating the applications?
Okay, so let's say that you have applications. Yeah, so you have applications in Configuration Manager. Here they are, okay. And you want to install the same application in the reference image just to verify. Because you're creating a reference image and you want to grab that. Yes, you can. There are numerous ways. Number one, you can use PowerShell and query Configuration Manager for all the applications and all the source folders, and also the installer types, which means that you can get the command line and you can also get the location where they are, and you can either run that over the network, so you run against the package source in the Configuration Manager, or you create an application and import it in the MDT. So that's pretty easy to do. Yeah, you need to PowerShell that. I mean, everything's going to be... Whatever you're asking is going to be, the answer is going to be use PowerShell. But it's doable. If you don't use PowerShell, you manually need to go through each of the application, do and copy and paste and copy and paste. And of course you can do that, but it's pretty easy to do PowerShell. Send me an email, I can write the PowerShell script for you. Any other question? No other question? Great. I'm going to hang around. If you do have any other question, thanks for stopping by, and please fill out the evaluation form. The session slide is 41. Thank you.